Hi, I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. And in today's video, I have the best romances that were released in 2022 that should have made the Goodreads Choice Awards. So like every year, I feel like I'm never surprised, but always disappointed in the Goodreads Choice Awards, especially for the romance category. The books that always make the list just seem to be from the same publishers. They have a great marketing team, and it just seems to be more of a popularity contest than the romances that were actually good or popular in the year. So around here, you know that I read a ton of romance. I am almost to 600 books read for the year. Majority of that is romance reads. And so the fact that I had only read 12 out of the 20 on their list was definitely interesting. And then even of the 12 of the 20 that I have read, most of them were just kind of meh or like middle road. A couple of them I did really enjoy. There were a few 5 stars on there for me, but like nothing that would have made my top reads of the year. So that's why I was super excited when Jess from Peace Love Books reached out to me and then a couple of others as well to put together this list of what our favorite 2022 released romances would be for the year. So definitely make sure to check out Jess's video and then everybody else who does this as well. I will definitely link Jess's in the description of this video. So again, these are just my top 20 romances that were released in 2022. So these definitely are not like my favorite reads of the year because I do read a lot of backlist reads as well. Some of these will definitely be on my favorites list of the year that you will see coming later on in the year. But these are the best that I have read that released in 2022. So without further ado, we're going to jump into the 20 books I have on my list. So first up is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This is my favorite book of the year, hands down. I can't believe this book didn't make the Goodreads Choice Awards list for the year. It's an absolute shame, which this book's published date was actually the same day that the Goodreads Choice Awards list came out. And due to their stipulations, it could have qualified to be on their list, but they didn't add it. So I actually read an arc of this book back in August and it instantly became a new all-time favorite for me. Not only like my favorite of the year, but like in my all-time favorite books list. Kennedy Ryan is just a top tier author for me. I feel like she is on a whole other level of writing romances and writing these beautiful emotional stories. Like all of her books are 5 stars for me. This one in particular though, I feel like is at the top of the 5 stars. So this one is a beautiful second chance romance between a divorced couple. Both characters are in their 40s. They are busy co-parenting. They are 2 children together. And then also they co-own a restaurant together as well. Tragedies in their past though pulled them apart and so they ended up getting divorced, but they definitely still have feelings underneath all of that. This story is just raw and real and packed with emotions that only Kennedy Ryan can write. I loved seeing the way that Josiah, the hero in this, absolutely worships Yasmin, the heroine. I liked seeing the way that mental health and therapy and depression played a role in this book as well. Kennedy's books always definitely hit hard. This one in particular deals with content warning dealing with like stillbirth and loss of a child. Next is Heartless by Elsie Silver, one of my favorite reads of the year. I feel like Elsie Silver blew up this year and I'm so excited for what she has coming next. This is one of those books that I was reading and I wasn't even like 20% into the book and I could already tell it was like a 5-star read. It was giving me all of those great feels. So in this one, we have a grumpy, selfless rancher, single dad hero, and then this Spitfire heroine who comes to work for him and his son as their nanny. This one just delivers on the banter, the tension, the chemistry, the caretaking. I love the hot tub moments in here. And this book was just everything. Like it's sexy, it's funny, it's charming. It's such a great time. I can't wait to actually reread this one soon. Next up is Always Practice Safe Hex by Juliet Cross. This is actually book 4 in her Stay a Spell series. I just have all the swoon for this book for Lavinia and Gareth. So this is a paranormal romance series that is set in New Orleans that follows 6 witch sisters. In this one, the heroine is an influencer witch and then the hero is a Grimm. And in this one, they start off as rivals. They're both competing in the same PR contest. And when they both get chosen as 2 of the finalists in the competition, they're actually tasked with working on a project together for a charity. So they have to start spending time together working on the project. This one does the hero falls first really well. I love seeing the heroine finally realize that he has feelings for her and then them both giving in. The whole family in the series is amazing. I love the chemistry and the heat and the connection in this one. And it does deliver on some emotions as well with a bit of a darker subplot going on. So I think it's an absolute shame that historical romances in particular have not been on the romance category list for the past 2 years at least with the Goodreads Choice Awards. So I definitely have some historical romances on my list. So first up is The Bride Goes Rogue by Joanna Shupe. This is the 3rd book in her 5th Avenue Rebels series. So in this one, the hero and the heroine, their fathers were actually business partners in the past and they always had a pact or like a plan for their only children to one day marry. So the heroine has lived her whole life kind of assuming that her and the hero are going to get married just because of their father's arrangement. So she decides to go to the hero's office to kind of get going on those wedding plans with him. So then when she shows up at his office, he's like, I never planned on us marrying. Like I never took that seriously. Like what a joke. So she leaves his office feeling embarrassed and hurt by the whole situation. And she decides like, why have I been wasting my time waiting for this man? You know what? I'm going to go out there and enjoy a scandalous night. So she ends up heading to a scandalous masquerade ball being held at Madison Square Garden. And then she ends up hooking up there with a mystery man. So then of course they realize a few days later that it was actually him and her that were sharing that passionate night together, and they have to kind of come to terms with the fact that they have amazing chemistry, and the story goes from there. This one, Joanna always delivers on a hot carriage scene, and this book was no different. Next up is A Matter of Temptation by Stacey Reid. This is a book in a new series from her set in the Victorian era. So in this one, the heroine and the hero meet when she actually sneaks in to take the place of her twin brother in a duel against the hero. So the heroine and her twin brother, who is a viscount, they've actually been living in kind of dire straits for a while, and her brother is very desperate for money when he decides to try to cheat one night during a card game, which is how he ends up getting involved and having to face the hero and Earl the next day in a duel. So he tells the heroine when he gets home about the duel, and she decides to sneak off because she's better at fencing than him. So she dons her brother's clothes and a wig, and she takes off to go fight the hero. So she actually ends up winning the duel. The hero is like so impressed with her that he ends up offering her a job before even realizing that she's a woman. And then when he does realize she's a woman, he still is like, well, you can still be my secretary. Like, I want to work with you. The hero in this one is very blunt and direct, which of course comes off a bit cold and starchy, but he's very passionate about his work, about politics and social reform of the time. So I liked seeing him and the heroine work on that together. The hero also feels super strongly for the heroine right away, and I liked seeing him kind of fight with all of these emotions and feelings that he's never felt before. There's a fun moment in here as well with the hero. He's like super studious, and so he decides to do his proper research, and he ends up reading some books to make sure that when him and the heroine get together that she's going to be thoroughly satisfied. Next up is A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. This is a really beautiful, emotional, character-driven, friends to lovers romance between a trans heroine and an ace-guard hero. So the hero is a duke, and he was actually injured during a war. And then the heroine, Viola, actually used the war as the perfect time to kind of fake her own death and live life as she always should have. So now it is 2 years after the war, and the hero has been just haunted by Waterloo, haunted by losing his best friend during the war, and of course being injured as well. So he has just kind of sequestered himself away at his estate. So when the heroine hears how the hero has been living, she decides she wants to go and be there for him and take care of him. So since she's been living as the lady's companion to her sister-in-law, they decide to go to the hero's estate together. So when they get there, the hero doesn't realize who she is right away. This one is definitely filled with angst and pining and just really beautiful friendship moments in here. This was definitely one of my favorite historical romances released this year. Next is Give Me More by Sarah Kate. This is actually the third book in her Salacious Players Club series, which all 4 books in the series did actually come out this year. I feel like this author and this series in particular just blew up, and I'm so excited for her because I loved all the books in the series. But this one definitely takes the cake for me and is my favorite. This one is an MMF, a romance between a married couple and their best friend. This one delivers on all the heat, but also all the heart as well, and just full of so many emotions. So the husband of the couple in here, he is actually one of the founding members of the Salacious Players Club, which is like a BDSM/kink style sex club. And then his best friend, the other hero, is the one who does the construction for the Salacious Players Club. So all 3 of the characters in here, they start off on a cross-country road trip for the married couple's wedding anniversary, as well as kind of a business trip as well, while they travel around the country to kind of visit other sex clubs. So while they're getting a tour of one of the clubs on their trip, the husband actually sees his wife and his best friend partaking in a rope session, and he's kind of intrigued with the idea of watching his wife and best friend together. So it takes off from there. There's a ton of pining and angst in here. Definitely, of course, delivers on the steam, but there's also really beautiful friendships and just like a really deep connection between all 3 of these characters. Next up is Juniper Hill by Devney Perry. I, of course, love Devney Perry around here. I have read all of her books, but this one in particular is one of my all-time faves. This one is a single mom romance with a grumpy chef who she actually ends up renting a garage apartment from. The heroine is new in town, and she takes a job at the Eloise Inn, which the hero's family actually owns, and that he actually runs the restaurant out of as well. The heroine is a single mom to her 2-month-old baby son, and she's just kind of struggling like every day, not feeling like she's good enough, just having that mom guilt, and like not feeling like she's doing enough for her son. So not helping matters is the fact that her son actually has colic, and so he's up at night crying. She can't settle him down, and they're like both just exhausted. So since they live on the hero's property, he actually can overhear them at night and hears a baby crying. And so one night he's like, this is enough. Like, I'm gonna go over there and help her. So he shows up and he offers to take the baby from her and like just walk around while she can nap. I love the chemistry in this one and seeing them work together and live near one another. The way that he loves her son was just everything. The entire Eden's family is just so wonderful, and I loved seeing them take in the heroine and her son. Next up is Embers by Claire Kent, and this is the 3rd book in her Kindled series. I've been obsessed with this series and this world that Claire Kent has created for the past couple months. This book in particular, though, released in 2022, so that's why I'm including it on this list. So this is a post-apocalyptic romance series that takes place in the near future after a global catastrophe. So in the series, basically Earth was hit by an asteroid that took out an entire continent and then just made the entire planet spiral into turmoil and famine and natural disasters. The whole series follows these survival stories. This one in particular has age gap, and then it has a deliciously closed off, gruff hero who doesn't think that he deserves anything good. So this is his survival story and then kind of his eventual romance, because this book does take place over about 6 years with his late son's high school girlfriend. So this one definitely has that kind of taboo, forbidden aspect with the heroine dating her dead boyfriend's father. This whole series has that very like isolating survival, just making it through every day through these dangerous situations vibe. But the beautiful romances and the hope for these characters through all this darkness is just so nice to see. Next is The Devil of Dublin by B.B. Easton, and this is a dark contemporary romance with some Irish Mafia vibes. So this book deals with two broken souls, it has Irish folklore, it has that fated mates kind of soulmate level love. We also get a broken boy in here who turns into an Irish Mafia hitman, and then the heroine who has gone through her own turmoils as well. And then it is all just gorgeously set in Ireland. So in this, the hero and heroine actually meet in Ireland as children, and we get to see their bond and friendship kind of form over those years. But life kind of tears them apart, and the heroine actually doesn't return until much later when she's an adult. So the story kicks off from there when they meet again as adults. There is some violence involved, and they actually end up on the run together. This one is just fast-paced and a really beautiful romance as well. Next is Restore Me by J.L. Seegers. I actually just finished this book and I cannot wait to add it to this list because it's definitely going to be one of my favorites of the year. So the story opens up with the heroine. She has been a widow for the last 4 years after losing her college sweetheart husband. She's kind of just going through life. She's an interior designer as well. And then she actually ends up getting tasked on a new project from a client to work with her enemy, who is actually her late husband's best friend. So the heroine and the hero, which was her late husband's best friend, they have never got along, and she doesn't understand why that he's always hated her. But of course, there's more to the story, and we get to see that as the story unfolds. This one definitely has a lot of emotions. So after the hero actually comes to the heroine's rescue at a club one night, she starts to see him in kind of a new light, and it also awakens her this just like need or want for physical closeness again. So when he overhears and sees that she's actually going to start dating again, he steps up and offers up himself for her pleasure. This one was just really beautiful, seeing how the whole story unfolds, and I can't wait to check out more from this author. Next is Parks and Provocation by Juliet Cross. This is actually a small town contemporary romance from her. So in this one, the heroine moves back to her small town in Tennessee, and she's kind of trying to figure out what she wants to do next with her life. So at the beginning of the story, she actually ends up accidentally locking her keys in her running car, and so to her rescue comes the hot fireman hero, which the hero actually ends up being her old high school crush turned teenage nemesis. The hero in this one, he falls first. He's the one who feels like she's the girl that got away, and so he uses this chance as the time to ask her out on a date. So the heroine ends up turning him down at first, but then her best friend, who she actually runs a dating podcast with, talks her into going out on a date with him because she's like, you know what, you could use this for material for our podcast. Which on the podcast, the heroine actually goes on first dates and then comes back to the podcast after the fact to talk about like what went wrong, how it could have gone better, and all things like that. This one was just super sweet and swoony. I love the history, and then of course the hero's pining. Next is June 1st by Jennifer Hartman. This book is just so sweet and tender and beautiful and special. This book takes place over multiple years, starting when the hero is just 6 years old and the heroine is born. This one has a bit of a forbidden aspect just because the hero actually ends up moving in with the heroine's family when he is a young boy, and so they're kind of raised around one another. This has the brother's best friend trope in it as well, and it's just a very beautiful emotional story from Jennifer Hartman. This is actually one of my absolute favorites from her. Next is Blindside by Candy Steiner, and this is part of her new college football romance series. I've been reading Candy Steiner for years, but I feel like this book in particular really blew up this year. So in this one, the hero is a football player for his college football team, and then the heroine works as a PR assistant for the team. So in this, the hero has recently broken up with his girlfriend, and he's just feeling heartbroken and wants to make her jealous by showing that he's moved on by fake dating. So when he sees the heroine is actually kind of crushing on this local coffee shop musician, he decides to offer her up the chance for them to fake date because he's like, you know what, that'll make that guy jealous and interested in you, and then it'll also make my ex-girlfriend jealous, like let's work together. So this one is really fun. It has fake dating, and then it turns into seduction lessons for the heroine. I love that the heroine is actually bookish, and so the hero actually borrows some of her books. He checks out like her annotations and moments that she's highlighted to kind of live out some of her fantasies with her. Next is Between Hello and Goodbye by Emma Scott. This is just a really beautiful contemporary romance filled with life and love and loss and grief and kind of the healing that comes after. So at the beginning of the story, the heroine lives in Seattle, and she's kind of tired of her life of like the same old thing, like partying, waking up with randoms, and kind of just like half-assing it at work. But when she does show up for work, she's actually really amazing at her advertising job, and she pulls in like multi-million-dollar accounts. And so her bosses actually give her a ultimatum, and they tell her like either you step it up and you become a partner with us, or you quit. So they tell her to take 2 weeks off and just go, figure out what she wants to do with her life. So she jets off to Hawaii. So while there, she decides she's going to focus on herself, take a break from men, but then on her first day, she actually ends up twisting her ankle while hiking near a waterfall. And that's when she meets the hero, who is actually one of the paramedic firefighters who comes to rescue her. So the hero is actually super taken with the heroine right away, and after dropping her off at the emergency room, he's with his family after, and he's kind of talking to them all, and he just like keeps talking about the heroine. And so his brother and sister-in-law are like, well, why don't you go help her? Like, you have days off, she's on the island alone, like go show her around. So in this one, the hero is a bit gruff, but he is definitely that hero type, like putting others first and just caring for others. And since the heroine has sworn off men, they decide to keep it as friends only because, you know, she's only there for a limited time anyways. This one just felt very real. They're both very easily pulled to one another. They have great chemistry. They also kind of have to contemplate like long distance, how that would work, and then like family and sacrifices coming up. And then of course in here, real life definitely shakes things up as well. Next is Fractured Sky by Catherine Cowles. This is the 5th and final book in her Tattered and Torn series. So at the very beginning of the series in book 1, we learned that the heroine of this book was actually kidnapped when she was a child and held captive for days before being returned to her family. And so over the years and in this book, we see that none of them have really ever gotten over that. They're very overprotective and very sheltering of her. But lately the heroine has started to feel kind of suffocated by all that love and protection. And so she decides it might be the perfect time for her to think about getting her own place and moving out. So one day she's actually at this horse rehab ranch where the hero works, and she kind of just feels safe with him. Like the way that he treats the horses, she feels safe around him as well. So she tells him about her plans to move out, and then he actually ends up offering up a cabin that is on his property for rent. This one was just really beautiful. It is slow burn as it should be with their story. I loved seeing the hero at his work, like rehabbing these horses that were abused. It just has a lot of great full circle healing moments. So next up, I definitely would have loved to see some Mafia romances on the list. So first up is Brutal Vows by J.T. Geisinger. This is the 4th and final book in her Queens and Monsters series. So this one is a Mafia romance between a widowed heroine who's known as the Black Widow, and then the hero is actually the man who is supposed to be arranged to marry her niece. So the heroine, like I mentioned, she's known as the Black Widow, and she was actually married off young and had a really bad marriage. And so when she overhears that her brother is wanting to marry off his daughter, her niece, and goddaughter to the hero, she's like, hold up, like I'm gonna have a say in this because I don't want her to go down the same road that I did. So the hero and the heroine, they meet, and they definitely hate each other right from the start, which of course just leads to amazing chemistry and banter. On the wedding day, there's actually a little bride switcheroo, and the hero actually ends up marrying the heroine instead. So the heroine is just a badass. She's one of my all-time favorite heroines, and I loved her. I loved how just like open and honest the communication is between her and the hero in this book. Both the hero and heroine have been haunted by things in their past, and so it's just really beautiful seeing them have their HEA together. Next is Mafia Madman by Mila Finelli, and this is the 3rd book in her Kings of Italy series. So this is a Mafia romance as well, and in this one we get to see the hero, a villain, get his HEA. So this is set in Italy. It has a captor-captive situation, and the heroine in this one is actually the sister-in-law of the hero's enemy. So one day when he sees her, he decides it's the perfect chance to kidnap her to get back at his enemies. This one has that great forced proximity on their yacht, which is where he takes her back to. It has that enemies to lover banter. There is some hate banging in here, and praise kink, and degradation, and humiliation, and age gap as well. This was just a really great one. I loved seeing the hero's revenge plan kind of backfire on him as he falls for his captive. So the next 2 books are actually books that were on the Goodreads Choice Awards list this year, and ones that I really enjoyed and felt like were worthy of being on the list. So the first one is Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. So this one is a sapphic romance, and the heroine Delilah is actually back in her hometown to be the wedding photographer for her stepsister's wedding. So Delilah never felt like she fit in growing up in her town, as well as she's kind of estranged from her stepmom and stepsister as well. So on her first night back in town, she actually runs into Claire, who is one of her stepsister's best friends, and it's someone that Delilah always crushed on growing up. So Claire is a single mom, and she's just kind of stressed out with trying to co-parent with her ex. And I just love this one. I love the found family. I love the strong friendships. I loved all the healing and kind of the emotions that were going on as well. And this was actually the book that I voted for on the Goodreads Choice Awards. Last up is Twisted Hate by Anna Huang, and this is the 3rd book in the Twisted series and my favorite of the series. So Josh and Jules' romance has been kind of hinted at for the whole series, since it was fun finally getting to their book. This one has a very hate to love vibes. She is his sister's best friend. There's lots of tension in here and a ski trip with only one bed. And then at one point, Josh actually offers up an enemies with benefits situation with Jules. And so the story just kind of goes from there. So those are the 20 books that would have been on my Goodreads Choice Awards list for books published in 2022 for the year. I, of course, would have loved to see historicals making the list, as well as indie romances. I feel like indie romances are where it's at for romances being published lately, and the fact that they don't add any on their list is just a shame. There were a couple indie authors on the Goodreads Choice Awards list, but all of the indie authors on their list were actually all picked up by traditionally published book deals. So like it would have been nice to see some actual just, you know, indie authors on that list. So this was really fun to do, and thanks so much to Jess for reaching out and asking me to be a part of this. After this, I actually can't wait to go watch Jess's video and everybody else who participates as well and see what some of their choices were. I know that some of us are definitely going to have some of the similar books on there. Let me know in the comments what your favorite 2022 released romances of the year would be, if you agree with any of the ones on my list or would have added some of your own. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.